Hello and welcome back. Today we are taking a look at the brand new Mighty Morphin Power Rangers Reignition toys from Playmates. I want to talk about this line a bit while we go through these, but I think what I'll do is I'll show off the packaging of each of the figures and talk about the Reignition line as we look at the packaging. This is, I believe, the first wave of figures from Playmates. It's the Morphin flip head Rangers. So you get the 6 Rangers. There is Goldar. And there is Rita. I believe there's also a putty. I think I've seen that available online at Amazon for slightly more than standard retail, which I refuse to pay. So I haven't got that yet. These, I believe, are officially released next week. But Smith's website had these available online for home delivery, so I quickly snapped these up. I believe they also have the Megazords, or the individual Zords, the deluxe Megazord play light up thing, and a number of the role play items, which, to be honest, I'm not interested in, so I won't be getting those. But if you are interested in them, or you are looking for them for your kids, check out Smith's Toys website, and hopefully they will have what you are looking for. So this is the Reignition toy line. I believe there are more figures coming with standard Ranger releases, which will be done on sort of the standard O-ring bodies, which will be very similar to what Bandai was doing with the Rangers around the time of Super Mega Force, Dino Charge, those sort of seasons. So if you've seen any of those figures, I think that's a reasonable summary of of what the standard figures are going to be like. But until they're in hand, I couldn't say for certain. Anyway, let's start taking a look at the packages for these. So first up, we have the Red Ranger. With the exception of the female characters, and I have no idea why, all of the figures have a Triny option, so you can pull back and do the morphing action, or in the case of the villains, they have their own individual play features. They come in a standard blister pack packaging. You can see the accessories they come with. There is a little tag on the front summarizing the figure you're getting and the Try Me option. All of the packaging is the same for each of them, with the Rangers' heads down the side. That's very reminiscent of something Bandai sort of productions and images were doing towards the end of their stuff. I quite like the packaging. I like the green in it. You've got the lightning coming through. Power Rangers Reignition name at the top. Head flipping Morphin action. Playmates 4+. Underneath is our legal barcodes. It's worth noting, if you are interested, that all of the Power Ranger toys are being distributed, so they're made by Playmates, but within the UK they're being distributed by Character Options. On the back is a bio for the Mighty Morphin series, a promo shot of the Rangers together, a cross-sell of the figures in the wave, our play feature, the open back for our play feature, and then there is an individual bio for our Ranger as well. It's worth noting this QR code doesn't take you to the official Power Rangers channel. It actually takes you to what I think is Playmates channel, and as far as I can tell, there's no Power Rangers content on there, so it's a little weird. I would have thought the QR code should have taken you to the official Power Rangers channel, because that is where the Mighty Morphin Reignition series is being aired, and I would have thought that would have been the place that you would have wanted to have promoted this most heavily. So I'm going to show off all of the other figures in their packaging, just while I talk about the Reignition line. So, for those who don't know, the Power Ranger line was sold to Hasbro, about 6-7 years ago now? Jeez, has it really been that long? But it was sold to Hasbro, and Hasbro's CEO had big plans for what he wanted to do with Power Rangers as a whole. Very sadly, he passed away, and the new heads obviously don't quite have the same visions as the previous CEO did. So while they rework their plans for Power Rangers, licensing rights were sold to Playmates to make toys. There are so many adult collectors online complaining about this line. Okay, first off, this is not a line for collectors, it is a line for children, and I personally think Mighty Morphin is a excellent starting point to sell a Power Rangers line to kids. So obviously this is Mighty Morphin's over 30 years old as a series now, and the idea of trying to sell 30-year-old TV series to kids is obviously a bit of a weird one. However, the fact is, Power Rangers is now over 30 years, as I've said, which means that the kids who grow up on this are now in their very late, sort of the mid-30s, late 30s, maybe even early 40s. They have kids themselves. So not only does this capture on the nostalgia market, it makes a sell easier, because parents instantly recognize the brand. They go, oh, that's Power Rangers, I grew up on Power Rangers, I know what the Pink Ranger is. Which means when they see the toys on the shelves at the toy stores or Tesco's or wherever, they can quickly grab a figure knowing what the toy is, knowing what can be expected of the brand as it's sold to their children. Whereas if they see a, I don't know, Beast Morphers or some other series, the question instantly becomes, oh, is that a weird Power Rangers knockoff? Because let's face it, 90% of the people buying this, probably even 99% of the people buying this, aren't familiar with the 30+ year history of Power Rangers. They don't care if it's made by Playmates or Hasbro or whoever. They want to buy a toy that is fun and engaging for their children to play with. And taking a Mighty Morphin figure is definitely a lot easier sell on that front than it is to take a random season like SPD or whatever, where the kids who grow up on it are probably still in their mid to late 20s. They probably don't have the family, they probably don't have the disposable income in those who are older and have their kids. So it's definitely a lot easier to sell. It's a bit like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. You always have your 4 turtles, no matter what they look like, you always have your 4 turtles. They're always the same 4 colours. So any parent who's out shopping for their kids instantly knows, oh, that's Michelangelo, that's Leonardo. I know what turtles are. That is a nice brand for my kids. I'm going to buy those toys. And I feel using Mighty Morphin as the selling point for a toy line to kids is the same idea. Essentially, it's a brand that adults will recognize and hopefully approve of for their kids to play with. As for kids, it's Power Rangers. Kids love Power Rangers, and I think regardless of whether the series is 30 years old or 3 years old or whatever, it's a series which is almost timeless to a certain degree, should we say. It's the same format throughout each series. It's young adults, teenagers being granted fantastic powers, changing into brightly coloured costumes, fighting monsters, and then using big giant robots to help save the day. It's the same format throughout. The only difference is, the look of the costumes year on, year out. So for a kid, whether it's Mighty Morphin, Dino Charge, Beast Morphers, or whatever, the kids see that it's Power Rangers and go, that's what I want to watch, that's what I want to engage with. So, and with this line, Hasbro / Playmates have done AI upscaled episodes. Now, I'm not going to talk about AI and my issues with that here, but they've done AI upscaled episodes of this series, which are available on YouTube, and it seems YouTube is becoming more and more of a regular place to show kids their TV products, I guess. I mean, Hasbro's doing it with their Transformers Cyber World. I can't remember what it's called. Toyline and show. They're doing 10-minute episodes on YouTube. Power Rangers are doing it. So, and a lot of shows after they've aired on Nickelodeon or Disney or whatever channel it is, are now uploading it to YouTube. And YouTube is a free streaming service that parents don't have to worry about paying a bill for. So I guess it makes sense when trying to promote and sell your show to kids to put it on a platform that is easily accessible for those kids. But that's my 2 cents on these pieces. As for the toys themselves, I do like the look of these. They look quite fun. I like the packaging, as I've said. So without any further ado, let's get these opened up and take a look at the figures within. And we now have all of our figures out of their packaging, and we can take a look at each of them. Just very, very quickly for those interested, that is what the back of the blister packaging looks like. So let's start with our villains, and let's start with Rita. So we get her infamous wig, the crest, her cones. There's some really nice molded detail throughout on the costume, but it is missing paint apps. 1, this is a kid's toy, and 2, it's Playmates, so I think missing paint apps is just going to be par of the course and to be expected, so I'm not going to complain too much about that, especially since these are, squarely kids' toys. The 1 does have a couple of paint apps on it, which do make it pop a little more than standard. Otherwise, it's done in a grey plastic. But it looks like her wand. The face, I don't think is necessarily a particularly great likeness of the character. I think with all of the Rangers as well, or all of the characters, the paint out they've given the faces, it makes them look more comic booky or cartoony than their real life counterparts. But again, I don't think it's too bad. I think for play value, they're reasonable enough. Rita has articulation at the head, which I think is... Oh, it's on a ball joint. Yeah, so you can get the standard ball joint type movement. The arm is on one of those O-rings, so you just get the standard range of movement there. Bend and swivel at the elbow, and there is rotation at the wrist, which is quite surprising. There's swivel at the waist. There is no bend in the knees at all, although the legs in theory could move out and move forward a little. However, this skirt is really tough rubber, so you're not going to get any movement there. Additionally, there's no sort of slits or anything like that to allow for posability on that front. We get her feathers down the back here, and her play feature is the casting of her wand or magics. So you press the button on the back and her arm swings forward. It's a nice little fun play feature. Both villains come with a FX piece. Rita's is the sort of magic spell effect that she's gripping onto, and then Goldar is some FX to go around his sword, which we'll look at in just a moment. But there we have Rita. It's a reasonable figure. I think for the £10 price point and the fact that this is, it's squarely a kid's toy, I think it's reasonable enough. I like the idea of them having an action feature that adds playability to our or to the toys, which I think is always a good thing for kids. Additionally, that doesn't really hinder posability of our character too much because she's still on that O-ring swivel. So that is Rita. Let's bring her at the back there. Let's just bring our figures and stand those up. One thing I will say at this point, all the figures bar Rita stand really well, so kids aren't going to have a problem with posing their characters ready for battle. We then have Goldar. Goldar comes with his sword, which is done in a gold plastic with just a small little red paint app on it. The gold on Goldar isn't bad at all. It's not a gold, but it works well for the character. It's obviously missing a lot of paint apps, but obviously, as I've said, it's to be expected, it being a kid's toy and whatnot. Articulation wise, the only articulation he has is at the arms, which is the same as Rita, and there is hinges at the shoulder pads to allow for that movement as well. There's no swivel at the waist. Oh, there is a slight movement of the head, but its mould is going to hinder that quite a bit. He gets that FX piece I was talking about, which just slides over the sword, and is very reminiscent of what we were getting with the Lightning Collection figures. He's got his tail painted on in the back. Interestingly, it looks like there are moulds here for knee joints, so I assume at some point during the design process the Playmates originally intended for Goldar to be able to have bends at the knee, and it's my assumption that eventually, and you can see actually it's molded in here as well at the feet again, so it's my assumption at some point Playmates felt the cost of tooling articulation was too much for this figure, but it's interesting that the original designs seem to have incorporated that in, whether that's so that they can use the mold at a later stage with articulation without the play feature, maybe, I don't know. His play feature is the moving wings, and that's done by the gripping of the legs, which is a standard kids play feature. It's nothing special, it's fun enough. As a kid, I would have certainly preferred maybe articulation over a play feature, just so I could kick with it, but it's not too bad. It doesn't really deter from the figure being a fun toy nonetheless. Oh, one other thing I can quickly mention is height on these characters. So let's just take a quick look. There it is. So our male rangers stand at about 5.5 inches. Goldar is pretty much dead on the 5-inch mark. Rita's 5.5 with her wig, and our female rangers also are around the 5.5-inch mark. So they're all scaled together, but they certainly won't scale with Lightning Collection if anyone's interested in that. So let's just move Rita out of the way, and Goldar as well. And then we have our rangers. So all of the rangers come with 3 accessories. They get their Blade Blaster in Blaster mode, which is done in a red and white paint app, but it has plenty of molded details throughout on this, so if you were inclined you could certainly customize this and get some really nice detail on it. They also come with their Blade Blaster in their Blade mode, and again, same molded detail throughout, and even it onto the blade of the sword, which is a nice touch. If you want to store the weapon in blade mode in its holster, you can see here that it does have a hindrance on how the arms rest. It's not so bad if they have their blaster mode there. So that's just something to be mindful of. Green Ranger also comes with his Dragon Dagger, which is done solely in a gold plastic with a fine silver paint app on the end. Paint apps for these figures are minimal, being kept rather to the molds of the plastic. So you can see there's some paint apps here for the arms with the standard diamonds, the belt. I don't know if it shows up on camera or not, but there is a very smudged outline of the dragon coin in the Ranger's belt. It's almost like it was very faintly molded on and then just a of paint was put on the top, and it's now sort of faded it away, but it is there. You can see there's molded detail for the Green Ranger's shield along the waist, but it's not, or the chest, sorry, but it's not painted. The Green Ranger's shield is molded plastic and is molded as a part of the torso. That's understandable given the play feature here. I know older ones have normally had the shield removable, but this obviously allows kids to have that play feature without the hindrance of the shield having to be taken on and off. Articulation wise, there is no articulation at the head. The arms are not on O-rings and they are just on a swivel. The elbows do have a hinge and swivel, as do the wrists. Legs are on those O-rings and they come out and around, so you can get a nice range of movement there. knees have a bend and swivel, and there is an ankle swivel as well. So there's plenty of articulation here for the kids. You can see there is certainly paint apps missing from our figure, but it's not too bad. It's certainly instantly recognizable as the Green Ranger, and I think kids will be plenty happy with that. The key play feature with this, which is standard with all of them, is the pressing of the hinge on the back here to morph the Rangers from civilian to Ranger mode, and it's a nice smooth snapping action on the male figures. I'm going to cover the female figures in a bit, but they are a little different. Tommy, as I mentioned with Rita, they're more of a comic booky look, and I think that's down to the tones of the paints they've used, but it's a reasonable likeness. I think kids will instantly recognise it as it being supposed to be Tommy, and the play feature is certainly fun enough. So there we have our Green Ranger. I like it. I think releasing the automorphins before standard play characters is a little weird, but I don't think it's detrimental in any real way. I suppose in some ways it's probably better because it allows kids to get familiar with the character and the Ranger as well. So it is kind of a fun or an interesting way of selling these characters to kids. Then I have the Black Ranger. He has the same blasters as Green. He has his power axe. Now is a really good time to mention that these weapons do not combine into the power cannon, which is very, very disappointing. That is such a key play feature with all these Ranger toys, and the fact that it's missing is a shame. I don't know if the eventual standard figure releases will allow will be different molds of the weapons and allow for the combining. I kind of hope they do, and if they do, it then raises the question of why not just use the same molds here. It wouldn't have been difficult to have moved this piece up and molded it here rather than up here. It certainly doesn't slide across. It's missing a lot of paint apps, but it's reasonable. There's certainly more paint apps here than you would normally expect from Playmates. Normally it would have just been in a solid one colour, but they've added some yellow stripes through, which gives it some nice definition. He gets a nice grip on it in the axe mode. Cannon mode is a little more difficult. Because the handle is so much wider and there's also the trigger there, he doesn't get as nice a grip on it as maybe you would want, which is a little bit disappointing, but it's still doable, and I think kids will be perfectly fine with it. We get the Mastodon helmet done in a solid black with silver paint apps. Because it's a black helmet, it kind of just looks like you lose a lot of the definition here, and stood back a bit, it kind of just looks like a black helmet rather than there being the trunk and everything else, which is a little disappointing. But again, this is a kid's toy, and fine details and everything else aren't necessarily to be expected. He has the same articulation as the Green Ranger, as do Blue and Red. And I think the same is for Yellow and Pink. On the belt and the power coin, you can sort of see a blob of paint which almost kind of resembles the Mastodon coin. There's definitely some sort of molded detail, and the paint's just been slapped on over the top. These are, kids' toys. They're going to be played with. Kids aren't going to be looking at the coins. But I think it's interesting that they took the time to mold that, but then just slapped paint on top. Morphing feature exactly the same. and we then get a distinctly comic booky, cartoony Zack head, especially with the way his hair is just kind of flat. But it's serviceable. Kids will instantly recognise it as being Zack. But all of the likenesses on these are certainly more of a comic book, cartoony inspiration rather than screen accuracy. But again, kids' toys, so you're not expecting it to be photorealistic or anything like that. So that is our Black Ranger. Overall, I'm enjoying. I like these Automorphin figures. I think they've been well done. They're chunky. They're certainly playable from a kid's perspective. So yeah, I think they work for what they are, but they're certainly not aimed at the adult market at all. And that's nothing wrong with that at all. I just want to stress that. So we have our Blue Ranger. Blue Rangers... Power Lance, that's the word I was looking for, does split into the power daggers, which is a nice touch. So that was certainly something Playmates didn't have to do, but it's been a nice consideration on their part. It's weird that they considered doing that, but they didn't consider doing the combining for the power cannon, which is weird, but it is what it is. Interestingly, with the Blue Ranger, we have that coin, but it's the exact same as Black's. And again, I don't know how well this is showing up on camera. It's the exact same as Black's. So it almost looks like he's got the Mastodon coin rather than the Triceratops, which is a little weird, but it is what it is. And it's again, it's a kid's toy, so kids aren't going to be too concerned about what is there. It's just instantly recognizable as being a Power Ranger. We flip to Billy's head. This certainly looks like more like an older Billy rather than the season 1 Billy. He's missing his glasses. I don't know what or why Playmates decided not to mold in some glasses here. I don't think it would have been too difficult. I assume it was probably a cost feature and the possibility that maybe they would have gotten caught some way in the flip head feature. Out of all the likenesses, I think this is probably the most, or the closest resemblance to one of our characters. But again, because of the paint apps they're using, it certainly looks more like a comic booky, cartoony kind of interpretation. But I kind of like the comic booky, cartoony interpretation of these. I think that's a nice artistic way to go with the figures. And again, as I said, the helmets are missing paint apps and fine detail, but they are still instantly recognizable as our Rangers. We then have our Red Ranger, who gets his power sword, which is done in a red plastic with a silver paint app on the blade. We get the molded detail throughout, and that is the same with all these weapons. There's plenty of molded detail in the weapons, which looks great. And if you're a collector of these and you want to customize them, you could certainly bring out a lot of detail on all of their weapons. And I think that's a standard course with Playmates. They tend to do a lot of molded detail in their figures and weapons and everything else. It's just the paint apps which tend to be missing, which I understand. You know, if you're designing a figure, it's the same whether it's got a groove in it, if it doesn't, but the paint to paint that groove is going to cost more. So I understand that. I understand why it is. Interestingly, again, the Red Ranger has that almost Mastodon coin. So it's clearly they've just taken the Black Ranger's mold and just molded all of the males the same way, bar green, which does have a different mold. Get our Red Ranger helmet, and then it flips to Jason. This Jason is definitely very Boom Studios comic-esque. Certainly looks more like his comic counterpart than it does TV show. But again, I think kids are going to instantly recognise that this is supposed to be Jason, and I think they will be happy with it. So then we have the female Rangers. And as I noted, the female Rangers didn't allow for the Triny function in the play features. And there seems to be a reason for that, which is a little disappointing. And I will cover that in a minute. Yellow Ranger here, she gets the Blade Blasters, as we've seen, and she also gets her 2 size dragon daggers. I can't remember what they are now. Here, and again, she's got plenty of molded detail in those weapons. The articulation is exactly the same as the gents. It's just a slightly thinner torso. We get her sculpt here. You can sort of see the rest of the saber-toothed tiger mold, but it's very fine. And it's almost lost in the mold, which is a bit of a shame. But again, kids will instantly recognize it as the Yellow Ranger's helmet. For some reason, the girls have grooves in their chests here. I'm not quite sure, and I think that's to help with the morphing feature. So the girls have a different morphing feature. When they are in their Ranger mode, they don't automorph, which is very, very disappointing. Given the heavy promotion that they're supposed to be automorphins, these don't morph, or demorph, should we say, when they are in Ranger mode. So you have to just move the head manually, which is a disappointment. Here we have Triny's head sculpt. It's a nice enough look of Triny, and again, it reminds me very much of the Boom Studios comics look, but it's recognizable as the character, and I don't think kids are going to have too much of a fuss or issue with that. So as for the flip feature, as I said, it doesn't auto work when they are in Ranger mode, but when they're in civilian mode, it does flip back. I don't know how well it's showing up on camera. Maybe if I move the front panel a little, you can see that there is some white corner tips here, which is to do with the diamond pattern on the back, but it does mean that they are noticeable on the front, which is a little disappointing. So with the girls, because they have a slimmer body, you can see here that the spring works on a couple of hinges at the base of our opening ports. So you can see here that that hinge comes up, pushes it, and the spring releases the flip, which is different to our male features. So if I bring in red, I don't know how well this is going to show up on camera. You can see here that the Red Ranger, or all of the male Rangers, don't have those hinges at the base here. And I think the springs are loaded more into their shoulders, which allow for the flip to be automatic. I'm assuming Playmates couldn't work the same spring-loaded transformation into the smaller shoulder plates of the girls. So I'm assuming that's why they don't automatically flip in the same way as the male figures do. If I was a kid, I wouldn't necessarily understand that, and I'd be quite disappointed, to the point that I would wonder if it was even broken. And I think there will be kids out there who do wonder that. I guess it can't be helped. It is just it is a disappointment. I do wonder if there was another way to do this with our female characters that allowed for these to work. But I'm not a toy manufacturer, so I couldn't say. Pink Ranger is missing a lot of paint apps from her helmet. It's just done in a solid pink colour. And it's certainly the worst helmet of the lot. It just kind of looks kind of cheap without the white there. So it is a bit of a disappointment. And also, because it's pink on pink, you lose that moulded detail of the pterodactyl crest there, which is a shame. The power bow is a nice resemblance to our standard TV counterpart with some little paint apps there, which is reasonable. Both girls don't have any molded detail in the power coins. They're just done as a plain gold. Pink is designed with a skirt which matches her TV appearance. It has a slit here which allows for a little bit of articulation. There's no slit here. I certainly would have preferred the skirts to have more of a give, because this does hinder the character's movement at the legs, which is frustrating. It certainly wouldn't have been difficult for Playmates to have molded the skirt in such a way that it didn't hinder the movement too much. Pink is the exact same issue as yellow. There's no auto morphin here when she is in ranger mode. If you flip the head back to civilian mode, we have a very goofy looking Kimberly. I think the toothy smile doesn't really help, but it's a reasonable likeness of our character. I'm not too keen on the blusher on the cheeks, but it's a design choice that Playmates have gone with. And a weird one, because that was an added paint app that didn't seem necessary. Otherwise, she works in the same way as yellow and auto flips once she is in civilian mode. So there we have our 6 Rangers, Rita and Goldar. For the most part, I like the figures. I think they're great kids' toys. I think they have some fun play features which kids will enjoy. There's just been a couple of frustrating choices on Playmates' part, which I feel hinder these being from really great figures. That being the failure to include a power cannon combined mode for our toys, and a lack of articulation in our villains. But that, to be honest, if you're familiar with Playmates Power Rangers Turtles line, is nothing surprising there. Typically the main heroes have plenty of articulation, but all of the side characters and villains and things just have a basic articulation, usually because they don't share a mold that can be used multiple times. So I guess that's understandable. And it is kind of just what it is. But as I said, overall, I think these are fun toys. It's great to see Power Rangers back on toy shelves. And I'm really hoping that this is as successful as Playmates and Hasbro are wanting it to be, so that 1, we can see more toys, and 2, the brand can continue to try and grow again. Thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Until next time, stay safe and may the power protect you.